An unemployed veteran helps a stranded motorist who turns out to be a famous general. It was the kind of coincidence that most people would dismiss as fiction, but for Marcus Holloway, it became the day his life changed course. The rain fell in icy sheets across the deserted highway, each drop striking Marcus's windshield like tiny bullets. He hunched forward, squinting through the blur of his wipers that desperately fought the deluge. His ancient Chevy pickup, the last possession he truly owned, coughed and sputtered beneath him, threatening to join the growing list of things that had abandoned him. 3 months without work, 3 months since the manufacturing plant had closed, leaving him adrift in a sea of identical resumes and unanswered phone calls. The severance pay had dried up weeks ago, and the modest savings he'd managed to build after his discharge from the Army had vanished paying rent on an apartment he could no longer afford. Tonight was his first night officially homeless. The duffel bag beside him contained what remained of 15 years of adult life. 2 changes of clothes, a worn photo album, his service medals, and the tattered remains of his dignity. His hands, once steady enough to disarm explosive devices under enemy fire, now trembled against the steering wheel. The headlights caught something in the distance. A sleek black sedan pulled onto the shoulder, hazard lights blinking weakly against the storm. Marcus almost drove past. Almost. Who would blame him? He had his own problems, his own storm to weather. But something made him slow down. Maybe it was the military training that never quite left his system. Maybe it was because he understood all too well what it meant to be stranded with nowhere to turn. Or maybe, in some corner of his soul, he didn't want to examine too closely. He needed to feel useful again, if only for a moment. His tires crunched on the gravel as he pulled over 20 yards ahead of the sedan. The rain immediately soaked through his thin jacket as he stepped out, the cold biting at his skin like hungry wolves. He hunched his shoulders against it, an instinctive, futile gesture. Through the downpour, Marcus could make out a figure standing beside the sedan. A man in what appeared to be an expensive suit, now thoroughly drenched. As Marcus approached, the stranger turned, revealing a face weathered by age and experience, with sharp eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they saw. "Car trouble?" Marcus called over the drumming rain. The man nodded, gesturing to the rear tire. "Blowout. I was on my way to Fort Branton for a ceremony tomorrow." His voice carried the measured cadence of someone accustomed to being heard. The rental company promised roadside assistance, but they're quoting a 3-hour wait in this weather. Marcus knelt beside the tire, rain streaming down his face and neck. The rubber was shredded beyond repair. "Got a spare?" "In the trunk, but I'm afraid changing tires isn't my specialty." Marcus stood, wiping ineffectually at the water in his eyes. "It's mine. Served as a mechanic for a while before..." He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Something flickered in the stranger's eyes. Recognition, perhaps. Not of Marcus personally, but of what he represented. "You're military." It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded. 8 years. Army, 54th Engineers. The man extended his hand. "Richard Keller." The name meant nothing to Marcus as they shook hands briefly, both immediately returning them to pockets for warmth. "Marcus Holloway." Without further conversation, Marcus set to work. His fingers, numb by cold, fumbled with the trunk latch and then the spare tire kit. The stranger, Keller, helped as best he could, holding a small flashlight that cast weak yellow beams through the raindrops. As Marcus worked the jack, a familiar rhythm returned to his movements. There was comfort in the mechanical process, in knowing exactly what needed to be done and how to do it. For 15 minutes, he wasn't an unemployed veteran living out of his truck. He was just a man with a purpose, with skills that mattered. "You're good at this," Keller observed, watching Marcus's efficient movements. Marcus tightened the last lug nut with a grunt. "Learned on worse than this. Try changing a Humvee tire while sandstorms strip the skin off your face." "Afghanistan?" "And Iraq. 2 tours each." The spare secured, Marcus lowered the jack and stowed the flat tire in the trunk. His clothes clung to him like a second skin, water dripping from his eyelashes and nose. The cold had settled deep in his bones, making his old shoulder wound ache with familiar intensity. Keller reached into his wallet and extended several bills. "I can't thank you enough." Marcus stared at the money, temptation warring with the last vestiges of his pride. He needed it. God, how he needed it. But something in him couldn't accept payment for what any decent person would have done. He shook his head. "No need for that, sir. I insist." Keller's tone remained gentle but firm. "I didn't stop to get paid." Marcus took a step back, fighting the voice in his head screaming at him to take the money. "Just helping out." Keller studied him for a long moment, rain streaming down his face. Then perhaps you'd accept dinner instead. There's a diner about 10 miles ahead. I could use a hot meal before continuing, and I'd appreciate the company. Marcus hesitated. His stomach clenched at the mention of food. He'd been rationing his supplies, knowing they needed to last. One meal, a warm place to sit for an hour. Was his pride worth turning that down? Lead the way, he finally said. I'll follow you. Back in his truck, with the heater struggling valiantly against the chill, Marcus wondered what he was doing. Following a stranger to a diner, when he should be finding a safe place to park for the night. But the prospect of warm food and a brief escape from solitude proved too powerful to resist. The Golden Light Diner sat just off the highway, its neon sign buzzing in the rain-soaked darkness. Inside, vinyl booths and chrome-edged tables gleamed under fluorescent lights. A bell jingled as they entered, drawing momentary glances from the few other patrons, mostly truck drivers seeking refuge from the storm. Sit anywhere you like, gentlemen, called a waitress with tired eyes and a ready smile. Coffee'll be right out. They chose a booth by the window, where they could watch the rain lash against the glass. Keller removed his sodden suit jacket, revealing a crisp white shirt with what looked suspiciously like military ribbons on the breast pocket. Marcus, however, was too focused on the laminated menu to notice, his eyes gravitating toward the cheapest options out of long habit. The waitress brought steaming mugs of coffee. Marcus wrapped his hands around his, letting the warmth seep into his frozen fingers. The first sip was scalding and perfect, spreading heat through his chest. Order whatever you'd like, Keller said. It's the least I can do. Pride warred briefly with hunger before surrendering. Thank you, Marcus said simply. When the waitress returned, Marcus ordered the country fried steak with extra gravy. Keller chose a club sandwich. As they waited for their food, silence stretched between them. Not uncomfortable exactly, but weighted with unspoken questions. Marcus stared into his coffee, feeling the stranger's eyes on him. How long have you been out? Keller finally asked. 4 years in December. Marcus didn't ask how Keller knew he wasn't still serving. Something about homelessness left its mark, visible to those who cared to look. And the job market hasn't been kind. Marcus's laugh held no humor. That obvious, huh? I recognize the signs. Too many veterans come home to find the country they served has little use for their skills. Keller's voice carried a quiet anger beneath its measured tone. What was your specialty? EOD at first. Explosive ordnance disposal. Then mechanical work after my second tour. Marcus rotated his shoulder unconsciously. Took some shrapnel. Nothing major, but enough to get reassigned. Their food arrived, steam rising from the plates. Marcus fought the urge to devour his meal immediately, cutting the meat with deliberate slowness. The first bite nearly undid his composure. Hot, salty, substantial food after weeks of cold sandwiches and canned beans. Your family? Keller asked between bites of his sandwich. Marcus shook his head. Mom passed while I was deployed. Dad's been gone longer. No siblings. No wife. He hesitated, then added, had a fiancée once. She couldn't handle the nightmares, the moods. Can't blame her. Friends from your unit? Scattered. Some didn't make it back. Others are dealing with their own issues. Marcus shrugged. We keep in touch on Facebook, but everyone's got their own battles. Keller nodded, understanding in his eyes. And now? The question hung between them, deceptively simple, yet impossibly complex. Marcus stared at his plate, fork suspended. What now indeed? Tonight? Marcus said finally. Find somewhere to park where cops won't hassle me. Tomorrow, hit the employment office again. Keep trying. He met Keller's eyes. That's all any of us can do, right? Keep trying. Something shifted in Keller's expression. Respect, perhaps, or recognition. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a business card, placing it carefully beside Marcus's plate. When you're finished, I'd like to make you an offer. Marcus glanced at the card and froze. Embossed in simple black text was a name and rank that made his heart stutter. General Richard Keller, U.S. Army Redower Director, Veterans Transition Initiative. The recognition hit Marcus like a physical blow. General Keller, the architect of the Ramadi stabilization, the man whose strategies had saved countless American lives in the Middle East, a living legend in military circles, now heading one of the most respected veterans support organizations in the country. Marcus set down his fork carefully, suddenly conscious of his soaked clothes and unshaven face. Sir, Keller raised a hand. Eat your dinner, Sergeant. We'll talk after. The sergeant wasn't a guess. Somehow Keller had identified his former rank without being told. Marcus complied automatically, the ingrained response to authority temporarily overriding his shock. As they ate, Marcus's mind raced. Was this really happening? Had he actually helped General Richard Keller change a tire in the rain? The absurdity of it almost made him laugh. Almost. When both plates were empty, Keller leaned forward, elbows on the table. The ceremony I mentioned at Fort Branton? I'm receiving an honorary medallion. Nothing important, just brass patting brass on the back. His dismissive tone suggested he truly believed this. But the timing is fortuitous. I've been looking for someone with your background. Sir, the Veterans Transition Initiative needs a mechanical instructor. Someone who can teach basic automotive maintenance to veterans transitioning to civilian work. The position includes housing on site at our training center in Harborville. It's about 70 miles from here. Marcus's pulse quickened. I don't have teaching credentials. You have something better. Experience. Authority. And clearly the willingness to help when it's needed most. Keller's eyes held Marcus's steadily. It's not charity, Sergeant. It's a job that needs doing, and you're qualified to do it. The offer hung in the air between them, impossibly perfect, suspiciously convenient. Marcus had learned long ago that when something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. Why me? He asked finally. There must be hundreds of veterans with better qualifications. Perhaps? Keller nodded. But I believe in fate, Sergeant Holloway. Or if you prefer, I believe in recognizing opportunity when it presents itself. Tonight I needed help and you stopped. You didn't know who I was. You didn't ask for payment. Those actions speak to character. Marcus stared down at his empty plate. Hope, that dangerous emotion he'd worked so hard to suppress, flickered to life in his chest. I'd need time to think about it. Of course, Keller's smile was understanding. But I should mention that the position includes immediate temporary housing. Tonight, if you accept. Outside, thunder rumbled as the storm intensified. The prospect of sleeping in his truck in this weather made Marcus's shoulder ache in anticipation. I accept, he said quietly. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Sergeant Holloway. Keller extended his hand across the table. I believe this arrangement will benefit us both. As they shook hands, Marcus felt something shift inside him, like a weight being redistributed rather than removed. Still present, but somehow more bearable. They drove through the night, Marcus following the general's sedan, wipers fighting the relentless rain. In his rearview mirror, the lights of the diner diminished until they were swallowed by darkness. Ahead, unknown possibilities awaited. It wasn't salvation, Marcus reminded himself. Just a job, just a chance. But after months of closed doors, a chance was everything. The Veterans Transition Initiative campus sprawled across 30 acres of former farmland, its buildings arranged in a loose horseshoe around a central green space. Even at night, with rain obscuring most details, Marcus could see it was substantial, larger than he'd expected. General Keller led him to a modest two-story building at the edge of the property. Staff housing, he explained, unlocking the door to reveal a simple but clean apartment. Basic furnishings, but comfortable enough. The kitchen stocked with essentials. You'll get a proper tour and introduction tomorrow. Marcus stood in the doorway, overwhelmed. Sir, I don't know how to. No need. Keller handed him a set of keys. Get some rest, Sergeant. Report to the main office at 0900. We'll handle paperwork then. Before Marcus could respond, the general was gone, headlights sweeping across the window as his car pulled away. Marcus closed the door and stood in the silence, water dripping from his clothes onto the linoleum floor. The apartment was simple. Living room with a couch and TV, small kitchen with a round table, bedroom visible through an open door. Nothing fancy, nothing personal. But it was dry, it was warm, it was safe. Marcus set his duffel bag down carefully, as if any sudden movement might shatter the reality around him. Then, moving mechanically, he showered in hot water for the first time in days, changed into dry clothes and sat on the edge of the bed. Only then did the tears come. Silent, unexpected, they slipped down his face as the events of the day caught up with him. Not tears of joy or sorrow, but of relief, the overwhelming release of tension held too long. He hadn't realized how tightly he'd been holding himself together until this moment, when it was finally safe to let go. Sleep claimed him quickly, dreamless and deep. Morning arrived with sunlight streaming through uncurtained windows. For a disorienting moment, Marcus didn't recognize his surroundings. Then memory returned, along with a spike of anxiety. Was this real? Would it last? A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Outside stood a woman in her 50s with salt and pepper hair cut in a practical bob. She wore khaki pants and a polo shirt with the VTI logo. Sergeant Holloway? I'm Diane Mercer, campus coordinator. Her handshake was firm, her smile genuine. General Keller asked me to get you oriented. He's in meetings all morning, but he'll see you this afternoon. The next few hours passed in a blur of introductions and information. The Veterans Transition Initiative, Marcus learned, had been operating for 5 years, providing training, housing, and employment assistance to veterans struggling with civilian transition. The campus housed training facilities for various trades: construction, technology, automotive repair, culinary arts, along with dormitories for program participants. Most of our instructors are veterans themselves. Diane explained as they toured the automotive shop where Marcus would work. We find it creates an immediate rapport with the students. The facility impressed him: 6 service bays equipped with lifts, a classroom space with engine components for demonstration, and a parts room stocked better than some commercial garages. This is serious equipment, Marcus observed. The general doesn't believe in halfway measures, Diane replied. When he commits to something, he ensures it's done properly. As they continued the tour, Marcus met other staff members. Most veterans, as Diane had mentioned, with stories not unlike his own. They greeted him with the easy camaraderie of those who share a common experience, without the awkward pity he'd grown accustomed to from civilians. By noon, Marcus had been issued an ID badge, email account, and staff handbook. The position, he learned, included not just housing, but health insurance, retirement benefits, and a salary that brought a lump to his throat when Diane mentioned the figure. "This can't be right," he said, staring at the employment contract. The general was quite specific about the compensation package, Diane assured him. He values expertise. After lunch in the campus cafeteria, where the food rivaled any restaurant Marcus had visited recently, Diane escorted him to the administration building. "The general will see you now," she said, gesturing to a door marked simply Keller. Marcus straightened his shoulders before knocking, an unconscious return to military bearing. The general's voice called him in. The office reflected its occupant, functional, unadorned, with no displays of medals or honors, despite a career that had surely accumulated many. General Keller sat behind a desk stacked with folders, his attention focused on a document before him. "Sergeant Holloway," he said, looking up. "Please sit." Marcus took the offered chair, noting that Keller wore civilian clothes today, slacks and a button-down shirt. No hint of his military status except in his posture and bearing. "I assume Miss Mercer has given you the tour and explained the position?" "Yes, sir. It's more than generous." Keller set aside his paperwork. "I've reviewed your service record." At Marcus's surprised look, he added, "I have connections in personnel. Your commanding officers spoke highly of your technical skills and leadership abilities. 2 Bronze Stars, not insignificant achievements." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Just did what was needed, sir. As you did last night." Keller leaned forward. "I want to be transparent with you, Sergeant. I could claim our meeting was pure coincidence, but it wasn't, not entirely." Marcus tensed. "Sir, I was indeed heading to Fort Branton, and I did have a blowout. But I have roadside assistance I could have called. I chose not to." Keller's gaze was steady. "I've made it a practice, whenever possible, to test the character of potential staff members in unstructured situations, to see who they are when they think no one of consequence is watching." Understanding dawned slowly. "You were testing me, in a manner of speaking. The position exists. The need is real. But I didn't know it would be you filling it until you stopped to help." Keller's expression softened slightly. "I've found that formal interviews reveal very little about a person's true nature. But how they respond to someone in need? That tells me everything I need to know." Marcus absorbed this information, uncertain how to feel about it. "So if I hadn't stopped, then we wouldn't be having this conversation? But you did stop. You helped without expectation of reward. You refused payment for your assistance." Keller spread his hands. "That's the foundation of what we do here. Service without calculation." The explanation made sense, yet Marcus couldn't help feeling manipulated. "With respect, sir, that's a hell of a way to recruit staff." To his surprise, Keller laughed. "Indeed it is. Inefficient, somewhat deceptive, and occasionally leaving me stranded when no one stops. But effective." His expression grew serious again. "I need people who understand on a fundamental level what it means to serve others. You demonstrated that quality, Sergeant Holloway." Put that way, Marcus couldn't argue. And regardless of the general's methods, the opportunity before him remained real. A chance to rebuild, to be useful again. "When do I start, sir?" "You already have." Keller handed him a folder. "These are the current students in the automotive program. 12 veterans, various backgrounds, all working towards certification. Your predecessor left detailed notes on their progress." Marcus opened the folder, scanning the profiles. Men and women ranging from their 20s to their 40s, most with combat experience, all struggling with civilian transition in one way or another. People like him. Classes resume Monday. Keller continued, that gives you 3 days to review the curriculum and prepare. Mrs. Mercer will assist with anything you need. And if I'm not qualified, if I can't teach them properly, you will. Keller's confidence was absolute. Not because you know everything about automotive repair, though your experience suggests you know a great deal, but because you understand what they're going through. That connection matters more than technical expertise. Marcus wasn't convinced, but he nodded anyway. I'll do my best, sir. That's all any of us can do. Keller stood, indicating the meeting was concluded. Welcome to VTI, Sergeant Holloway. The weekend passed quickly as Marcus familiarized himself with the curriculum and prepared for his first class. By Monday morning, as he stood before 12 wary veterans in the automotive shop, his anxiety had been replaced by a strange calm. These were his people. He spoke their language. My name is Marcus Holloway. He began. 8 years Army, 4 years unemployed, and as of last Thursday, your new instructor. I'm not a teacher by training. I'm a mechanic who's been where you are, trying to figure out what the hell to do in a world that doesn't always value what we learn to do. The tension in the room eased slightly. A few students nodded in recognition. So here's my promise to you, Marcus continued. I won't waste your time with bullshit. I won't pretend I have all the answers. But I will teach you everything I know about fixing engines. And maybe together, we'll figure out how to fix some other things along the way. A young woman in the front row, Corporal Jessica Ramirez, according to the roster, raised her hand. Sergeant, the last instructor quit without notice. How do we know you'll stick around? The blunt question might have offended some, but Marcus appreciated her directness. Fair question. 3 days ago, I was living in my truck with no prospects. General Keller gave me a chance I didn't expect and probably didn't deserve. I'm not going anywhere. His honesty seemed to satisfy them. The class proceeded into a diagnostic exercise with students working in pairs to identify engine problems. Marcus moved among them, offering guidance where needed, learning their strengths and weaknesses. By day's end, he was exhausted but satisfied. This wasn't the life he'd imagined for himself, but it felt right in a way nothing had since his discharge. The weeks that followed established a rhythm. Mornings in the classroom, afternoons in the shop, evenings spent preparing lessons or sometimes joining other staff members for dinner in the cafeteria. Slowly, Marcus began to feel part of something again, a community with shared purpose. He saw General Keller infrequently. The man traveled often, speaking at events and meeting with potential donors. But when he was on campus, he made a point of stopping by the automotive shop, asking specific questions about students' progress that revealed he was paying closer attention than his busy schedule suggested. 6 weeks into his new position, Marcus was summoned to Keller's office. The general sat with a folder open before him, containing what appeared to be student evaluations. Your students speak highly of you, Keller said without preamble. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. They're good people, motivated. Indeed, but their progress exceeds expectations. Ms. Ramirez has already secured a job interview with Henderson Automotive Group. Mr. Patel's diagnostic skills have improved dramatically. Keller closed the folder. You've done well, Sergeant. Thank you, sir. Which brings me to my next question. Keller leaned back in his chair. How are you? The simple inquiry caught Marcus off guard. Sir, you've focused entirely on your students. Commendable, but not sustainable if you're neglecting your own needs. Keller's gaze was penetrating. So I ask again, how are you? The question penetrated defenses Marcus hadn't realized he'd constructed. How was he? Physically better. Regular meals and a proper bed had worked wonders. Professionally engaged and purposeful. But emotionally? He hesitated, searching for words that wouldn't sound ungrateful. I'm functioning, sir. Keller nodded, unsurprised. Functioning is a start. But it's not enough, is it? Marcus stared at his hands. No, sir. The transition isn't just about employment, Sergeant. It's about finding meaning beyond the uniform. Keller's voice softened. I struggled with that myself. After 40 years of service, civilian life felt inconsequential. The admission surprised Marcus. General Keller had always seemed so certain, so purposeful. What changed? He asked. I realized I was asking the wrong question. Instead of what now, I needed to ask who now. Keller gestured to the campus beyond his window. This place isn't just about teaching skills. It's about rebuilding identity. The words resonated uncomfortably. Marcus had defined himself as a soldier for so long that its absence left a void civilian employment alone couldn't fill. I don't know who I am without the uniform, he admitted quietly. Few of us do at first. Keller opened a drawer and withdrew a business card, sliding it across the desk. Dr. Eleanor Wright. She runs our weekly group session for staff, Tuesdays at 1900 in the community center. Attendance is voluntary but encouraged. Marcus picked up the card reluctantly. With respect, sir, I've tried therapy before. It didn't take. This isn't therapy in the traditional sense. It's veterans talking to veterans about the challenges of transition. Keller's expression remained neutral, but his eyes conveyed understanding. Consider it reconnaissance. Gather intelligence before deciding its value. Put in military terms, the suggestion felt less like an intrusion. I'll think about it, sir. Good. That's all I ask. Keller stood, signaling the end of their meeting. You're making a difference here, Sergeant Holloway. Allow others the chance to do the same for you. The following Tuesday, Marcus found himself outside the community center at 1855, debating whether to enter. Through the windows, he could see about a dozen people arranged in a circle, most faces he recognized from around campus. 5 minutes later, he slipped into an empty chair just as Dr. Wright was beginning. She acknowledged him with a subtle nod but didn't draw attention to his arrival. Tonight, she was saying, I'd like to discuss identity, specifically how we reconstruct it after service. For the next hour, Marcus listened as his colleagues shared their struggles and strategies. A former Marine described volunteering with disaster relief organizations to recapture the sense of mission he'd lost. A Navy veteran spoke about reconnecting with her childhood love of painting. A retired Air Force officer admitted to spending 2 years angry and isolated before finding purpose in mentoring youth. Their stories weren't revolutionary or miraculous. They were honest accounts of stumbling, failing, and trying again, of finding small anchors to weather the storm of transition. When Dr. Wright asked if anyone else wanted to share, Marcus surprised himself by raising his hand. I'm still figuring it out, he began hesitantly. For a while, I thought finding a job would fix everything. Now I have one, a good one, but there's still this. He gestured vaguely at his chest. This emptiness, like I'm missing something obvious that everyone else can see. Heads nodded around the circle. No platitudes or quick solutions were offered, just silent understanding that meant more than words. As the session ended, Marcus found himself lingering, eventually falling into conversation with James Chen, a former medic who now taught in the technology department. First time's the hardest, James said as they walked toward the staff housing. Feels like admitting weakness. Exactly. Marcus was relieved someone understood. In the service, we solved problems, completed missions, moved forward, and civilian problems aren't so clear-cut. James nodded. Listen, a few of us get together Thursdays for pizza and board games. Nothing fancy, just normal. You're welcome to join. The invitation caught Marcus off guard. When was the last time he'd done something purely social? I'd like that, he said finally. Thanks. That Thursday marked the beginning of a slow expansion in Marcus's world. Game night led to a weekend hiking excursion with James and 2 other instructors. That led to joining the campus softball team, which practiced Wednesday evenings. Gradually, imperceptibly, Marcus found himself building connections beyond work. Small filaments of friendship and shared experience that began to fill the void he'd carried since discharge. His teaching improved as well. As he grew more comfortable, he incorporated more of his own experiences into lessons, helping students see the parallels between military discipline and civilian success. He started a weekend workshop where veterans could bring in their own vehicles for maintenance advice, creating an informal community beyond the classroom. 3 months after his arrival, General Keller requested his presence at dinner, not in his office but at his home, a modest colonial house just off campus. Marcus arrived precisely on time, a bottle of whiskey in hand, uncertain what to expect. Keller greeted him warmly, accepting the gift with appreciation. Excellent choice. Please come in. The house surprised Marcus. He'd expected military precision and formality. Instead, he found comfortable disorder. Books stacked on side tables, a half-completed puzzle on a card table, family photos covering one wall. It felt lived in, personal in a way he hadn't associated with the general. My wife would have had things more organized, Keller said, noticing Marcus's attention to the room. Patricia passed 4 years ago. Cancer. I've maintained a bachelor's chaos ever since. I'm sorry for your loss, sir. Shh, thank you. Keller gestured toward the dining room. I've prepared a simple meal. Nothing fancy, but edible. Dinner was pot roast with vegetables, basic but hearty. As they ate, conversation flowed more easily than Marcus had expected, ranging from campus matters to books they'd read recently to their shared experiences in the Middle East. "I've been following your progress," Keller said as they moved to the living room with glasses of whiskey, both professional and personal. Marcus settled into an armchair. "Sir? Doctor." "Wright provides general updates on group participation, nothing confidential," Keller clarified. "And I've observed you becoming more integrated with the community. Softball, I understand?" "We're terrible," Marcus admitted with a small smile. "But it's fun." "Good. Connection matters." Keller sipped his whiskey thoughtfully. "Which brings me to the purpose of this dinner. I have a proposition for you." Marcus tensed slightly, reminded of their first meeting. "Another test, sir?" Keller's laugh was genuine. "No, nothing so dramatic. In fact, quite the opposite." He set his glass down. "I'd like you to consider taking on additional responsibilities, specifically helping me develop a more structured peer mentorship program for new arrivals." "Me?" Marcus couldn't hide his surprise. "I'm still figuring things out myself." "Precisely why you're the right person. You understand the challenges because you're still navigating them." Keller leaned forward. "The most effective guides aren't those who've forgotten the difficulty of the journey, but those who remember it clearly while making progress." The logic made sense, yet Marcus hesitated. "What would this involve?" "Initially, working with me to formalize the process, identifying key transition points, developing support strategies, training peer mentors." Keller's expression grew more animated as he outlined his vision. "Eventually, I'd like you to lead the program. It would mean a promotion, of course, with corresponding adjustment to your compensation." The offer was unexpected but intriguing. Marcus had come to respect the VTE's approach and had seen firsthand how peer support accelerated healing. "I'd need to continue teaching, at least part-time," he said. "I've made commitments to my students." "Of course. We'd adjust your schedule accordingly." Keller studied him. "You found purpose in teaching them, haven't you?" "I have." Marcus realized the truth of it as he spoke. "It's different from what I had in the service, but it matters. That's what I hoped you'd discover." Keller's smile held satisfaction. "Not that civilian work could replace military service, but that it could provide different meaning, equally valuable if differently structured." Marcus considered the offer, seeing not just the professional opportunity, but the personal validation it represented. 3 months ago, he'd been homeless and hopeless. Now he was being asked to help shape a program that could impact hundreds of veterans. "I accept," he said finally. "Thank you for the opportunity, sir. Thank you for being worthy of it." Keller raised his glass in a toast. "To new missions." "New missions," Marcus echoed, the phrase resonating more deeply than he'd expected. As spring yielded to summer, Marcus divided his time between teaching and developing the peer mentorship program. Working closely with General Keller provided insights into the man's strategic thinking and deep commitment to veterans' welfare. What had initially seemed like chance, their meeting on that rainy night, increasingly appeared to be part of Keller's broader vision. The program took shape gradually. They identified key transition challenges, developed training modules for peer mentors, and created assessment tools to track progress. Throughout the process, Marcus drew on his own experience, ensuring the program addressed not just practical needs, but emotional ones as well. By August, they were ready to launch a pilot with 15 newly arrived veterans. The night before orientation, Marcus sat on the steps outside his apartment, watching fireflies rise from the campus lawn. The humid evening air carried sounds of distant laughter from the recreation center, where a movie night was underway. "Mind if I join you?" Marcus looked up to find Jessica Ramirez, his former student, now employed as a diagnostician at Henderson Automotive, standing nearby. She had returned to campus occasionally to help with weekend workshops, but her presence tonight surprised him. "Of course," he said, shifting to make room. What brings you back?" Jessica settled beside him. "General Keller called. Said you're launching some new mentorship thing tomorrow." She shrugged with deliberate casualness. "So, thought I might volunteer." Marcus smiled. "You'd be good at it." "Maybe." She stared across the darkening lawn. "When I first got here, I was a mess. Angry, defensive, not exactly mentor material. And now, still figuring it out. But better." She glanced at him. "You helped with that, you know. Seeing you work through your own stuff while teaching us, it mattered." The simple acknowledgement touched Marcus deeply. "Thanks for telling me." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fireflies. Finally, Jessica spoke again. "So this program, is it just for new arrivals, or can alumni participate too?" We're still finalizing details, but I don't see why not. Marcus turned to her. You serious about volunteering? Yeah, I want to give back. Her expression grew thoughtful. When I left Afghanistan, I thought I'd never find that sense of purpose again. The job helps, but it's not the same as being part of something bigger. Marcus understood completely. Come to orientation tomorrow. 0900 in the community center. I'll save you a seat. As Jessica left, Marcus remained on the steps, reflecting on their conversation. The mentorship program wasn't just about helping new arrivals. It was creating continuity, allowing those who had begun healing to strengthen their recovery by guiding others. A virtuous cycle that mirrored the military's own leadership development. The following morning, Marcus stood before a room of 30 people, 15 new arrivals and 15 volunteer mentors, including Jessica. General Keller had introduced the program briefly before turning the presentation over to Marcus. When I arrived at VTI, Marcus began, I was at the end of my rope, homeless, jobless, without direction. Many of you new arrivals might feel similarly, like you've lost something essential and can't quite name what it is. Heads nodded around the room. What I've learned since then, what we want to help you discover, is that transition isn't about replacing what was lost. It's about building something new that honors what came before. Marcus gestured to the mentors. Everyone here has struggled with that process. No one has perfected it, but together we can navigate it more effectively than alone. As he outlined the program's structure, weekly one-on-one meetings, group activities, progress assessments, Marcus felt a profound sense of rightness. This wasn't the path he'd imagined for himself, but it was meaningful in ways he couldn't have anticipated. From the back of the room, General Keller watched with quiet satisfaction. Their eyes met briefly, an unspoken acknowledgement passing between them. Both men understood that what they were building extended beyond this room, beyond this campus. A model for healing that could ripple outward, touching countless lives. After the orientation, as participants broke into mentor-mentee pairs for initial introductions, Keller approached Marcus. Well done, Sergeant, he said quietly. Very well done indeed. Thank you, sir, but we're just getting started. True, yet I have absolute confidence in where we're heading. Keller clasped Marcus's shoulder briefly. When I found you on that highway, I saw a man with untapped potential. Today I see that potential beginning to fulfill itself. The simple praise meant more to Marcus than any formal commendation. I'm grateful for the chance, sir. As am I. Keller glanced around the room where conversation flowed with increasing animation. I believe we've started something significant here, something that will outlast both of us. The weight of that statement settled on Marcus, not as a burden, but as a foundation. He had found not just employment, but purpose, not just housing, but home, not just colleagues, but community. That evening, Marcus returned to the spot where his journey had begun, the highway shoulder where he'd stopped to help a stranded motorist. The summer twilight painted the scene differently than the rainy night of their first meeting, but Marcus could still see it clearly in memory. He stood beside his truck, the same vehicle, now with fresh oil and new tires, and watched cars pass, each set of headlights a reminder of lives in transit, journeys unknown. 6 months ago, he had been adrift, a veteran without direction. Today, he was still a veteran, but one who had found new ways to serve, new reasons to continue. The road ahead wasn't perfectly clear, but it led somewhere worth going. As darkness fell, Marcus turned back toward campus, toward the lights that represented not just buildings, but possibilities, toward people who understood both what he had been and what he was becoming, toward a future built on the foundation of an unexpected encounter on a rainy night, when an unemployed veteran helped a stranded motorist who turned out to be a famous general. Some might call it coincidence, others fate. Marcus had come to see it differently, as proof that even in our darkest moments, connection remains possible, and through connection, transformation. He drove back to campus, back home, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities. And for the first time in years, he looked forward to facing them,